So should you buy the LFP standard range Model 3 rear wheel drive or the dual motor long range all wheel drive? It's the most common question I'm getting now. A lot of people are buying Teslas. Gas is crazy around the country, depending on where you are, and Teslas has become this kind of it's just more popular than ever. So these are the big questions, and if you're trying to save $7,500, and this price has varied through the last few years, there's been anywhere from as small as a $6,000 gap between the standard range Model 3 and the long range is as high as 9,000 plus. So we'll kind of break it down and kind of go through the main things that are different. And the good news is it's unique. There is no one answer for everybody. Your situation, your driving situation, your commute situation, your home charging setup situation, and what you value will determine which route you go. Either way, both cars are amazing. They're wonderful, they're fast, and they generally also look alike. So if we start, the first way to tell, especially if you're buying used, is how do you tell if it's LFP versus the nickel-based NCA battery? Because it doesn't really say on the website, and in the car it won't really say, but the main thing you're looking for is when you go to the charging settings, is for all of the nickel-based batteries, you'll see that there's a trip option at the last 10%. And then for daily, this is what you want your charge rate to be. For the LFP, you will not see this. It'll essentially have this completely gone, and the general sense and main difference is you can charge to 100% for LFP, but for the NCA and the older standard range Model 3s, and including the Performance as well as the Model Ys, you only want to charge to roughly 80% every day, and that's to eliminate stress on the battery long term. If you charge to 100%, you could make the battery degrade much faster, and it's just too much stress on the car. And essentially what you want to do is only put it on trip when you can drive as soon as it's done charging or pretty quickly. And the LFP you can charge to 100% no problem. So this one I normally actually keep it pretty low. My commute, I don't have one, I work from home, but the day-to-day driving is fine, and 358 miles is plenty for most. The interior, the vegan leather, the steering wheel, which is now heated. You'll get the front heated seats, the rear heated seats. This is all the same for the standard range and the long range. The only other difference for the general feel in the cabin are two things. One is the sound system. It's different enough that you will notice this if you sit in one and you test drive the long range, play some music. You'll notice that there is a lot of bass. There's no subwoofer in the standard range Model 3. So that's a big deal if you want bass when you're listening to music, because both cars have great speakers, but there's more in the long range dual motor, and there's also a subwoofer. So those are some items to keep in mind when you are buying this vehicle. Is how important is the music to you, and is it worth it as part of the extra range, which you're getting about 80 more miles of range. Generally, it's actually a little bit less, because if you charge the long range to 80%, you're really only getting like 280, 290 out of the car anyways, and the standard rear-wheel drive Model 3 gets over 270 miles range on the LFP, and it wants to be charged to 100%. So those are the things to keep in mind for the range. Is your day-to-day is roughly the same, but on longer trips and at lower states of charge, the nickel base, you'll have a lot more, of course, range to go at 50% versus the LFP at 50%, for example. But every day, if you're charging to 100 and you have a home charger set up, that's going to be great. The other piece beyond the sound is the general driving feel. So that is going to be, because there's an extra motor in the front of the vehicle, the balance of the car is going to feel different. For some of you, that's going to be great. I personally think the balance of the car is much better in the long range. Having a motor in the front, the car is a little heavier, and you can definitely feel the weight. Depending on the vehicle you're coming from, these cars are going to be incredibly heavy. These cars are close to 4,000 plus pounds, and the balance of the vehicle I actually find better on the long range for the way the car feels. That doesn't mean you'll think that, and you'll only really notice a difference if you test drive both. So one's going to feel lighter in the front versus the long range is going to feel a lot heavier, but to me it feels more balanced. I prefer the weight and the feel of the long range, the dual motor, than the rear wheel drive. You'll also notice a slightly different driving dynamics because there is two motors instead of one, and just the rear wheels driving when you accelerate versus all four. So those are some other things. And then lastly, and this is potentially a big deal, as we look at even traditional gas cars, when you start to start to have a lot of many thousands of dollars in upgrade, potentially the engine changes. And for these cars, the engine, there is no engine and it's not changing, but the power output is very different. So 4.2 seconds 0 to 60 feels a lot faster, like significantly faster than 5.8 seconds. Both are fast. And if you're coming from a vehicle that's not fast and have nothing as much to compare, most even performance cars, and I say performance subjectively, is if you're taking like a 200 horsepower car, you may be going to 0-60 in like 7 seconds or longer. So these cars will both likely feel faster than what you're used to, but if you're coming from a really fast performance car, you may go to dual motor anyways because you want that really fast acceleration. So let's go to the outside of the car. The other thing to think about for these vehicles is the home charging. So this is a Gen 3 home charger, and on the long range, this will charge faster than the LFP. So this charger can charge up to 44 miles an hour on a particular setup, and the LFP can only get about 10 miles an hour slower than that, so maybe 32 to 34 miles an hour. Both are going to have the same rims. This is aesthetically, you wouldn't be able to tell really if this was a dual motor or LFP. There'll be a dual motor badge in the back of the car. I've actually removed mine. The only difference here, maybe mine is tinted stock, it won't look as dark, and then the emblems I have blacked out that do not come that way normally. The long range does come with fog lights, which are down here, and you will not see those on the LFP. But from an aesthetics perspective, you won't have to worry about what the difference is as far as the look, but generally this is going to look exactly the same. So the other things to keep in mind with deciding which one, so if you don't care about acceleration as much, 270 miles is plenty for you and you can charge to 100%, which is a big deal. That's just extra range you get to use every single day. Is the other factors to think about when buying these vehicles might be just price, and there's really no other difference. It used to be the LFPs, not the LFP, but the standard range car only had premium connectivity for 30 days, and the long range they gave you a year. A few months ago, they changed that. Both cars have only 30 days for free, and then you can pay $10 a month for premium data. Rear heated seats were only included with the long range, and now both vehicles come with rear heated seats as an option, not even as an upgrade anymore. It looks like if you look at the website, it's included now. It was a $300 upgrade. You cannot upgrade the sound system in the LFP rear wheel drive. It's not something that's possible. And then the full self-driving price is exactly the same for both vehicles. The other cons you may have heard about with this technology, because LFP's been around for decades, it's not something that's that brand new. Tesla may have their own cell chemistry on these vehicles, is what we've learned, and I'll link in the description below, there's this amazing channel called The Limiting Factor, and they really break the difference down from the battery and the cell chemistry and the performance in all different temperatures. And generally the big takeaway is LFP at really cold temperatures, and what I mean by really cold is under 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius, performance drops dramatically in all situations, including the performance, long range, any of the Tesla vehicles. Cold weather performance sucks. However, if you precondition the battery, which is just a setting, you can say every day my commute is at X time and I want the car to be ready to leave by that time. It warms up the battery, and that's mainly really recommended if you can plug in at home so that you can start to not take the power from the car to precondition the vehicle. You can pull from the grid or solar, whatever you have. Is that pretty much negates the cold weather performance. It goes from really poor cold weather performance across the board, and LFP is extra bad, to both are good. It's very little range loss in general if you can have the battery preconditioned, and it takes a little bit of energy to get there, but essentially preconditioning eliminates that as a con for LFP. Last item I'll say, this might actually be a pretty big deal. These cars are incredibly safe from getting into an accident, in as far as 5-star plus safety rating across the board. However, the chemistry of the NCA battery in the long range dual motor, the Model Y, Model S, X, etc., that the safety of the temperature it requires to make essentially the cells combust, and if the cells do burst, the amount of like oxygen that gets excreted from the battery is significantly worse for safety reasons. So for what I mean by that is the temperature required for the cells to combust is much lower than the LFP. It's almost triple, like 2.5x higher temperature required for the LFP, and it's like, and the oxygen that gets exerted, and this again will be in that channel that I link, is significantly less in the LFP. So that is a much safer vehicle in the event of an accident where there's damage or penetration to the actual battery cells themselves. So you're more likely to escape, and the car won't be on fire or have any critical damage from the cells. Is the LFP really wins in that regard. It's actually quite significant, and might make you, if safety is number one, both vehicles would be great, but from that perspective, the LFP definitely wins. If I were to have it, if we could get this like over 300-mile range, a lot better performance from LFP, I would prefer that, because charging to 100 is such a good benefit for these vehicles. But because we can't do that, and I want the sound system as well as the longer range when we take road trips, that's going to be a bigger deal. And speaking of road trips, and this is it's minor, is at supercharging. In addition to the home charging being faster on the long range, it can supercharge faster. But faster is really only a few minutes. Over the course, like if both two vehicles were at, let's say, 10% state of charge, and we want to charge them both to 90%, the long range might charge faster at about 5 minutes faster. So something to think about, and that really only matters at lower states of charge, because it basically has a higher maximum charge rate that this can accept, but that only matters at the lower states of charge. So if both cars are charging at 50%, it's pretty much identical across the board. So I hope this was helpful in making your decision. It really is unique to what you value, but both cars are really, really amazing. And the LFP is also, again, I forgot to mention this earlier, is also a 1,000,000-mile battery. So if both these cars were driven, these cars kind of break down the batteries around a few 100,000 miles. LFP can go 700, 800,000 plus miles. And the remaining range you'll get over the life of the car will be higher with an LFP versus this one will have a lot less. So think about that if you are thinking about keeping these cars for 5, 10 years plus, is LFP will retain more range over the life of the car. So I'll link the huge breakdown, visit the limiting factor. I'll link the exact video that breaks all of this down with the chemistry. But for the other variables with the vehicle, you really can't go wrong, and you can save yourself a lot of money. So hopefully this was helpful. Have a good weekend. Take care.